today on our show Andy Allen from DriveLine Gear Service of Fallon. And I said we service all of northern Nevada and Lake Tahoe. This business has operations in both Reno and in Fallon. And they do more than many of you may know them for. We say driveline and gear, and the first thing that comes to your mind may be the drive axles of a vehicle. But there's so much more depth in this business, and especially in their Fallon location. We asked Andy to come on and share for our rural community members some of the things that they do that you may not be aware of if it wasn't for a show like ours. And at the level of integrity and quality that we endorse as a show, they're extraordinary quality, and we hope that you do take on shifting your consumer power to businesses like this. Andy, welcome to the show today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mitch. Good to be here.
So one of the things that we were going to talk about today is there's a lot of people preparing for the hunting season. And in doing that, a lot of people, they've been waiting years for some of these tags, too. I mean, I just talked to somebody that waited almost 30 years for a sheep tag. And the thing is that your truck in some of these remote locations, it's really critical to have it in top condition before you head out into those remote locations. So let's talk about that four-wheel drive, the person that's going to go out hunting, and what your recommendations would be for them before they head out and potentially get stuck in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As a hunter myself, I can relate with both aspects of one, having to wait sometimes for a lot of years. I had to wait 16 years for my first bull elk tag, and then so the last thing you want to happen when you go out there is to worry about any kind of failures mechanically with your vehicle. And a lot of people, until they need four-wheel drive, they just don't put it in four-wheel drive, obviously, so they won't know if they have a problem until they go to use it. So it's always good to look at your front drive shafts, anything related to the four-wheel drive or the front differential, your front drive shafts, and some of the older vehicles that have the manual locking hubs. You want to make sure those are functional and operational, and your transfer cases, whether they're mechanical shift or electric shift. If they're electric shift, you want to make sure that the motor's working or the switch is working, and sometimes you might shift it into four-wheel drive and think you're in four-wheel drive, but you're really not, because something's not working, and you won't know it until you get stuck. So.
Well, and the light's on the dash, and that's, I think, because some people just think, well, it's there, but you're actually going to take a closer look at that system and make sure that it's really functioning. And one of the things I think that is also important in that is that people actually don't just turn it on and move a couple of feet and, okay, it works, because the first time that system's under load is when that failure could occur. They really need to take it for a few miles and make sure that it isn't going to fail right out of the gate. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's absolutely right.
So let's talk about some of the other things that, like if somebody brought a truck to you and said, I'm going to go hunting, you'd probably recommend a complete four-wheel drive inspection process, right?
Yeah, I mean, a four-wheel drive inspection for sure, and to be quite honest, a vehicle inspection. I mean, a lot of what we do is drivetrain. Not a lot of what we do, but everything that we do. We specialize in drivetrain. A lot of people, they just neglect that part of the vehicle. It's advertised pretty well on TV and radio to service, change your engine oil and check your tires and all this stuff. Well, a lot of people don't even think about the drivetrain. You've got a differential in the rear. You've got a transmission, you've got a transfer case if it's a four-wheel drive, and you've got a front differential.
And all of these have their own separate fluids.
Absolutely, yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I've had people come in and tell me they didn't even know that there was fluid in there underneath their truck in any of these gearboxes, but every one of those components that I mentioned have oil in them, and some people don't even know, therefore it never gets checked or changed. So, yeah, as far as hunting goes, I mean, I definitely recommend getting your four-wheel drive checked out, but just underneath in general, anytime we get a vehicle in for, even if it's as simple as a drive shaft U-joint or something like that, we always just kind of give the vehicle underneath a once-over, because we have it up in the air. We have shop bays with lifts, so we get the vehicles up in the air and we wiggle things around. And I mean, I'll even check things that we don't do. I've caught people with mufflers hanging off or broken exhausts, here or there, or gas tank leaks. I mean, things that we don't even necessarily repair. We can we can find for these people and let them know that they have an issue that they didn't know about.
Well, one of the things that is when you get into some of these rural areas, one, cell phone may not be an option. You may really be stuck. And then the other thing is that the angle that the wheels are going to be transferring that weight as you're climbing over different terrain can, like you said, you're actually under there prying around to make sure things are really tight. It's because when they get out in there and they're crawling off-road, there's going to be different angles involved and different pressures involved, and things that may have already been weak can then snap.
So absolutely. And even bumpy roads. Bumpy roads, driving down bumpy roads, if something's loose, that gravel road or that washboard road might put the coupe de gras on it, and that bolt finally falls off, and then now you're stuck.
Well, and you talked about one of the things that you've seen a lot of recently, especially, is people will lift their trucks, and the goal would be, because I want to go have higher ground clearance. A lot of them, some of them are just, I like the way it looks, but for the most part, a lot of these people are lifting their truck for more ground clearance as well, and off-road clearance from different debris and brush. And some of these lift kits that you mentioned, you told me that you're seeing a pretty regular failure on because some things that are missing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in the world of the internet, most of the internet companies, and I'm not trying to badmouth anybody, but I'm just stating the facts here. Most of these internet places, they don't really care what happens after the sale. All they want is they want your money and they want to get the sale. So, they lower prices. They skimp on certain parts that you can buy a lift kit that'll lift your truck, but it might not come with every component that's needed to do it right, to where it's going to last for you, especially if you're going to use it off-road.
For example?
In some of the Chevys, that have the IFS front suspension, they have CV axles, and when you lift them, the distance between your wheels and the differential is going to be greater. So there should be some sort of spacer to compensate for that distance. Well, some of the less expensive lift kits that you can find online will not come with those spacers, and when you go off road and hit a bump and your suspension extends, that axle can pull itself out of the cup, and now your axle's flopping around in the breeze and you can't go anywhere. I mean, you can't drive the vehicle like that. 16
years waiting for that tag, and in one moment everything just becomes a waste.
Absolutely.
And now
and it's something that you never were even aware of, because so a lot of these guys, people that have lifted trucks, they may not really ever take them off road unless they have a reason to go, and since they haven't had a tag for 10 years or even a couple of years, and they've lifted their truck in the meantime, they don't know they have a problem until they get out there and it's too late.
Well, and we're really advocating, I mean, this is the reason and the premise for our show, that especially in light of the fact that there are many of our listeners right now preparing for this, to visit your Reno or your Fallon location and have this inspection done. One of the fantastic parts about a business like yours is that there's so much our community is not aware of that you do, and your store is no exception, and we really want to bring this part up, even though it transcends the automotive segment of what our show is about, because our opinion is that if we can bring consumers to you and spare them the annoyance of going to a lower quality facility and having a poor experience, we're still doing the community a service, even if it's off the beaten path of the automotive show that we are. And you have out in Fallon, you do a lot of agricultural equipment. And tell us a little bit about your involvement in the agriculture segment of the industry.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the one thing about tractors is it seems like every year, whether it's John Deere or New Holland or whoever makes the piece of farm equipment that you have, every year those guys put bids out for different companies to make their PTO shafts. The industry calls it PTO shaft. That's for power takeoff. That's what PTO stands for. So anything that a tractor runs, any piece of equipment, implement, it takes a PTO shaft to the power from the tractor has to turn whatever the equipment is that you're using, whether it's a mower or a baler or a pump or anything that you see when you're driving back by these fields and then you see a tractor pulling a piece of equipment. That piece of equipment is being run by a PTO shaft, which is basically essentially a drive shaft. And I mean, there's many different brands, many different sizes, series, and I mean, you'd be amazed actually if you opened up a PTO book and looked at all the components in there. A lot of people try to oversimplify it, but I mean, it's amazing at how many different brands and sizes there are out there. And we actually have the largest inventory in northern Nevada for PTO shafts and the agricultural industry there for that stuff.
Well, I think what's interesting is, and I've talked to some other people around this subject, is that the common thought process is that, oh boy, I've got a shaft out, and that there's really only one option: go to the distributor, manufacturer, or rep in the area for that and buy a new one. But just as you specialize in rebuilding drive shafts, in vehicles, you also rebuild these PTO shafts. And I want to talk a little bit about not just that you do that, but even the difference in your rebuilding versus new, that it may not just, there's a lower cost and the quality of that rebuild may be superior to a brand new shaft that just failed for obvious reasons that the consumer is not really necessarily taken into consideration. So talk to us about cost and talk to us about what you can do when you're rebuilding them to even make them superior to just a brand new one.
Okay, yeah, I don't think it's a big secret that the anytime you go to a dealership or the manufacturer of a part, typically it's going to be a little bit more expensive than you could find in the aftermarket world. And just like anything else, there's a ton of aftermarket parts out there, but we always try to stick with OE quality, or actually even the OE exact OE stuff.
And for our consumers that don't understand the acronym OE, we're talking original equipment.
Right, OEM, that's original equipment manufacturing. So the OEM stuff, and typically the OEM stuff is the better quality stuff to use. But two things with coming to a place like ours for that kind of thing. One, you're going to get the same quality or sometimes even better quality for a cheaper price because, the OE guys, all they do is you give them your VIN number or model number or serial number to whatever it is that you're looking for, and they're going to give you what it came with from the factory. Well, probably 80% of the time that's fine and dandy. But sometimes in certain applications there are updates or there are things that are common issues with these OEM parts that need to either be beefed up or need to be changed to an updated, component. So,
well, and for our listeners, you were describing just the fact that it could be the metallurgy, that inside this PTO shaft, you could see a dozen of them have the same failure, and you shift one component inside there to something with a higher dense, more dense material with a stronger metallurgy, and you can beef up the performance and life expectancy of the same shaft that's going back into their rig.
Absolutely, and also in not so much in the automotive side of it, but especially in the agricultural side, because it is such a competitive market on those companies getting the bids. Sometimes they do get inferior quality parts from the factory. So and once that stuff hits the counter and I can look at it and put my hands on it, I can tell you, yeah, this is good stuff, or you know what, I really recommend going to something better so you're not here every year doing this, and it's better to talk to somebody, in my opinion, and I'm not just saying this is because this is what I do for a living. If I were a farmer, I would definitely want to go to somebody that is in the industry and works with them on a daily basis and can tell me, if there's a problem with these. The last thing I want to do is spend $150 every year fixing a PTO shaft that I could spend maybe $225 one time and last me for 5 or 6 years.
Well, and typically, if you're doing OEM rebuilds to brand new, you're typically even less than the original. So roughly what can they expect to save just having you rebuild one than still just going out and buying a brand new one?
Oh, numerous times. I've had guys with tractors, that didn't know I was there. I'm actually located in an area that's right next to the tractor dealership in Fallon. So they go to the dealership, and the dealer, not only does it take them a week or more to get these parts, they'll ask me how much to build them a complete shaft, just like what the dealer would get them, and I a lot of times it's half.
And they're back to work within a day.
Absolutely, yeah. If I don't have the parts in stock, I can typically get them the next day.
So, you can save them several days of waiting for sometimes OEM parts to ship. The use of the equipment and the money that they're losing while it's down is huge on top of saving the money on the component. Andy, how do they get a hold of you, and where's your actual location out there in Fallon?
We're located in Fallon on Reno Highway. It's 5305 Reno Highway, and our phone number is 775-867-8255. 2617.
And for those of you in Reno, also there's a location on Glendale, and tell them a little where to get a hold of the Glendale location too.
Yeah, the Glendale locations is 1325 Glendale Avenue in Sparks. It's about a quarter mile east of Rock Boulevard. Their phone number is 775-331-4500.
Andy Allen, DriveLine Gear Service of Nevada, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mitch.